I will never tell anybody to leave, but I will tell you to plan, because in your planning, you will know when to leave. You will have everything lined up so that when you leave, you will not return. And that is the object of leaving an abusive relationship, is to plan. This is an emotional job, and it takes special people to do this work, and you're all special people, and you need to take care of yourself.
You may be the only person that has asked, how can I help you, instead of, you need to leave, I don't know why you're still there, you picked her, I don't see what's the problem, you've been there that long, you and your children need to leave. You sound just like an abuser.
I am honored to welcome Mildred Muhammad, and she is not only a domestic abuse survivor, she is the author of Scared Silent, and she works so much to try to get the truth about domestic violence out there. Take us back, Mildred, to the moment when you found out that your ex-husband, who you had 3 children with, was arrested as the D.C. sniper, a serial killer.
Create liaisons with other organizations and people who have resources that I could use to help other women.
Welcome to the Mildred Muhammad Show. I am your host, Mildred Muhammad, and thank you so much for tuning in to another show to get more informed about the issues that are in our community. Today I have with you my special guest, Eileen King. She will be discussing, or we will be discussing, child abuse, child-informed care, and other issues associated with children. This show is really special and dear to our hearts, and we want to make sure that the silent victims are represented here today. So Eileen, it was wonderful seeing you. It's been a while. We were discussing how long it had been since we've seen each other. So how have you been?
Thank you. I've been so very, very busy because we have a lot of cases, and I want to just warn your listeners, your viewers, that the pollen is heavy. And I came back from New York with a little bit of a cough, so please forgive me if I need to sip water and clear my throat and maybe do a cough or two.
Absolutely.
It's just wonderful to be here, and I'm so appreciative of all that you're doing and have done in the years since I first got to meet you and even know about you before I actually met you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm just so humbled that you were available to come on my show today.
Thank you.
So let's just get right to it. There are many children that are abused, be it domestic violence or just right out hurt, and we need to know what can we do, what should we do, what are the laws associated with that, and how can we, the community, step in to help children, and when should we believe them?
Yes. And I always say, you can't fix what you don't know about.
Right.
And if you don't know that intrafamilial child abuse, in particular incest, where there is a sexual assault on a child, and also where there's domestic violence, and the child is not just witnessing it, but they're experiencing it deeply, and it affects them and their development, not just now, but into their future lives. What people don't know is that when it's in the family, it's very easy for the abuser to fight for and get sole, physical, legal custody, not just in Maryland, but all over the country. So I am, and my organization is really a part of a large network of advocates across the country who are seeing these cases in our family courts and trying to make a difference, not just for individual children and their protective, non-offending parents, but for just getting the word out there. Because, as I said, you can't change what you don't know about. And this is one of those very closely kept secrets, if you want to name it like that. So people all around us with whom we work are trying to break the silence. Part of that is asking, how do we link up with the Me Too movement?
Right.
How do we link up with No More? How do we link up with Enough? How do we link up with the rising awareness in the social movements that say it's not good enough just to close your eyes, turn away, and say, no big deal, and pretend that it's all okay.
So when you say that the children are being pawns in
Yes.
in an abusive relationship, is it just abusive relationship, or is it any relationship?
I think that there is a background of abuse, and that's why we see this connection, overlap, or interconnection between domestic violence and child abuse. So where there's domestic violence in a relationship, the children are more likely to be abused. That's just what we know from various studies that have been done. And it's very different if you have people who don't get along. They may have been married, maybe not married, and they have children together, and they want to dissolve that relationship. They want to do it legally. For people like that, the vast majority of them do it without any particular problem. They work it out themselves. We're not talking about those folks.
Okay.
We're talking about cases that are often given, I think it's a misleading name, high conflict. It's more than just a high conflict. If one person is beating the other, financially abusing the other, threatening to take the children away, that you'll never see your child again, sexually abusing the child, physically abusing the child, withholding medications and therapies from a child. And these are just some of the ways that a person who wants to exert control, coercive control, will use to maintain this dominant power in the family structure.
Now, sometimes they use PAS,
Yes.
right? And we know PAS means
Parental alienation syndrome.
right.
Yeah.
And there's a growing number of fathers that are using this in order to gain custody with the children. Now, we also know that this PAS is something that was made up, and it's documented that it is. However, the courts still recognize it as an issue and will still grant the child to the father because of it. So, can you explain to the audience as best you as best you can,
Shortly, briefly,
of what it is and why they've chosen this to use?
Well, PAS really stands for Parental Alienation Syndrome. And you see variations of parental alienation syndrome used. Sometimes they just say parental alienation. Sometimes they just say alienation. But it's what we call a gendered theory. It's mostly used against women. It succeeds especially when it's used against women who are raising concerns about child abuse, especially child sexual abuse. And one of my colleagues, Joan Meyer, who is a professor of law at George Washington University Law School, and who is the founder of the Domestic Violence Legal and Empowerment and Appeals Project at GWU, is doing a study that's really looking at thousands of cases and seeing where does parental alienation succeed, where does it fail, what are the numbers. And so this study is just beginning to come out, and we're learning a lot. And kind of what we're learning is, what we thought was happening is actually happening. Women who raise concerns about sexual abuse, incest, child abuse, are more apt to lose custody at very, very high rates. And so alienation, I think, in all its variations, is successful, and it's successful against women because it reinforces gender stereotypes. Women are vengeful, women lie, women's credibility is problematical, women want to get an advantage in a custody suit, women are hysterical, women are obsessive, women are gatekeepers, and mothers. And and I'm saying women, but it has even a stronger weight when you say mothers, because mothers, of course, have an innate, instinctual, burning desire, and not just, it's more than a desire, it's like what they are. They are there to protect and raise their children. Mm-hmm. When you are a mother, you feel this. You are always aware of your child, how they are. You don't feel good if your child is not well. Right. You will do everything you can to make sure your child is well, happy, developing, succeeding. And so when a mother brings her concerns forward, she finds that her legitimate concerns, even if they have evidence, which I'll tell about the case in a little while, they're not taken seriously. And that's the problem that we see in case after case, not just in Maryland, but in state after state. And that in our conversations with advocates, we hear the same story from Hawaii to California to New York to Washington State to Florida to New York to Vermont. I mean, all over. Then, of course, we're linked in with folks in Canada and in Europe, and they're having the same problems there, too. So alienation is one of those, we would call it a pseudoscientific theory. It's extremely effective. It's the go-to legal strategy. Because alienation, they tried to get parental alienation into the DSM-5, which is the so-called Bible of the American Psychiatric Association. We and many others fought against that. So it's not part of, it's not a legitimate diagnosis. Okay. Nevertheless, many courts and many judges are still sort of open to hearing information about that. And there are ways to kind of introduce concepts of alienation where you're not actually using that word. Mm-hmm. And so, but you're still tapping into those biases that are there. Mothers are this, mothers are that. She's gatekeeping again. She's obsessed. She's enmeshed. That's another one. She's enmeshed with the child. She can't tell fact from fantasy. And so when this is brought forward by an expert, because oftentimes the abusive parent, in our cases, they're mostly fathers. There are some mothers, yes, of course. Our cases are mostly mothers trying to protect their children against an abusive father. They have more money. They have the money to bring in an expert who can opine as to what his or her diagnostic opinion is about the child and about the mother, about the relationship, about the family. Okay. And they often succeed.
Well, we're going to take a small break, commercial break, and when we come back, I would like to go more into the case that we talked about earlier that happened in Tennessee, and we'll be gone for just a quick second. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you on the other side.
It's the new, all-natural, family-friendly pharmacy, Family Choice Pharmacy, located at 8313 Annapolis Road, New Carrollton, Maryland. Family Choice offers alternative medicines as well as discount programs you can easily enjoy. Come be a part of our family at Family Choice Pharmacy, as every family should know their pharmacist. If you're looking to join the family today, you can reach us at 301-577-1212 at Family Choice Pharmacy.
If you like to roller skate, you will love Lanham Skate Center. We offer all kinds of specials, birthday parties, skate classes, and more. You can even reserve the rink for a special event. Skate rentals only $3, so roll on over to Lanham Skate Center today. Located at 9901 Lanham Severn Road in Lanham, Maryland. For more information about our weekly schedule, visit us on the web at lanhamskatecenter.com or call for more information at 301-577-1733. That's 301-577-1733.
Thank you for coming back to the Mildred Muhammad Show, where we are discussing with Eileen King about child abuse, incest, and PAS. So now Eileen is going to tell us about the case that occurred in Tennessee, where the child was being molested by the father, and the courts did not believe him.
Right. Just to give you just a little bit of history, the organization I used to work for, Justice for Children, was involved in this case way back in about 2009 or so, and 2008, 2009 in the appeal. And this case was being appealed because the child had made very strong disclosures of child sexual abuse by his father. And it was believed by Child Protective Services, it was believed by his pediatrician, it was believed by others who heard the child's disclosures. They thought that he had a very credible case. But the family court judge who was hearing this case said the mother was harming her child by believing this, and that she was making false accusations, and that the father was the one who deserved custody. And so he gave custody to the father, who lived in Missouri.
So why do you think that it was so important that the judge would only believe the father?
Well, I spoke with the attorney who I've known all these years, you know. This is over 12, 13 years now.
Okay.
She said that because when Justice for Children wrote its amicus curiae brief for it, we argued against the use of parental alienation syndrome.
Mm.
And the court there said there was no PAS in this case.
Mm.
This brief doesn't apply to the facts at hand. They threw it out. So I asked the attorney representing the mother. She said, well, here's what happened. The expert came in, and he talked about parental alienation, but he never used the word. He never used those words. He set the case up so that it would look like a case of parental alienation syndrome, but never used the words. And so the father was a handsome, good-looking professional who had a great income. And I think very often, you can't, people just don't believe that someone who is a professional, well-educated, this man was a veterinarian, making a good income, would be capable of doing such a thing. And on the stand, these gentlemen often are extremely compelling. They smile, they look good, they're very well put together.
Mm-hmm.
And the mothers are often very upset, emotional,
Right.
distraught, worried about what's going to happen, disbelieving. And so that scale, who's going to look more credible?
He is.
Yep. And so he walked away with custody. And then and the mother lost the appeal. Several years later, it was discovered, the FBI did an investigation, discovered child pornography on this man's computer.
But what made the FBI investigate?
I think there were the son came forward again, and he said he was being taken to certain places, to hotels, and the FBI got involved because they were crossing state lines.
Okay.
crossing state lines. And so he said he would be in a hotel and there would be cameras, and so this contributed to the FBI going, well, okay, we better look at this.
Okay.
And they did. And when they took custody of his computer, they found corroborating evidence, which said, yes, what the child is saying, it's true. So that was, I'm looking at my notes here, that was in, I think 2007, 2012, and this was after a grand jury issued indictments.
So what
from
was
the
happening
FBI.
to the child?
He was still with his father.
And what was the father doing to the child?
He was raping him. And the child today says, I was raped and tortured.
And when
That's
he said it when he was younger,
They
did
didn't
not
believe
him.
They had
and
to
they
have
did not believe the
visual
mother,
evidence, yeah.
even though she knew.
Exactly. It took that evidence, that child pornography. So he was arrested in 2012, and then years went by, and he still had access or custody of his child. Years went by.
So he was arrested in 2012.
2012.
And so where was the child?
With him. And then
even though he was arrested,
yes, even though he was arrested,
then he was still with the
Yes,
child.
yes.
The child was still with him.
yes.
But he wasn't in jail.
I don't think he was in jail then. And so years went past, and we were like, what is happening here? That was in 2012. So 2015, we said, we're going to write to the district attorney's office and say, what's going on here? Why are you not prosecuting this man? That was in 2015. It was March, so 3 years ago.
Years.
3 years ago. Took it, and it was 3 years.
And for 3 years, he's still with the father.
Yeah, I
and
think
he's
so.
molesting
Yes.
him. Wow.
Yeah. And so then so our letter was picked up by the Tennessean, which published it, and we wanted that to happen because we wanted to give a real push, more than a push really. We wanted to give a shove. And so it was picked up by the Tennessean, they wrote about it, and they said, what's the problem? And another 3 years passed. And
so
we
even though it was in the media,
even though it was in the media, even though
publicized,
even though there was news in the media, and I'm looking at a Tennessean article from 2015, even though it was known that there was child pornography, that was the cause of the FBI investigation and indictment by a grand jury, it still took that long. They had physical evidence that corroborated the child. So we pushed in 2015, waiting, and then we just got another alert that he had pled guilty to child endangerment, which is a much lower crimes offense. Yeah. So
what did he get in the end? Did he physically go to jail, or did he
I don't think
remain at home?
I don't think he's in
GPS
jail.
on his ankle?
I'm not sure what that. I haven't followed up yet on that.
Okay.
But the child is with his mother. He's now 14, and he said, just to quote what he said, trying to think or to find that place where he said, sorry, that of course the child's mother was not happy with this, and neither was the 14-year-old now. He said he delivered a victim impact statement in court after the deal was finalized. Facing his father, he described him as a terrible man, and I want this quote to be out there.
Okay.
He has threatened me. He's sexually abused me. He's tortured me, and he has threatened my family, the teen said. Although I do understand that this is the best I'm going to get in terms of justice, it was not my original plan.
So now this child is traumatized.
Yes.
For the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And he was sexually abused, and nobody but his mother believed him. What about the experts that came to testify during the case? Did they testify in his favor or towards the father?
Excuse me.
Or towards the father?
The experts testified in favor of the father. And
did the experts know it was true?
I cannot know
what's in their mind, right?
Yeah, I can't know what was in their mind, and I'm sorry to cough. This is also also upsetting in a way. It's like, how can this happen with so much documentation and evidence?
But we know that there are 58,000 children.
That's right.
That are taken from good mothers and given over to documented abusive fathers, and this child was just one of them that was in that system as well. So,
and I think this is such an incredibly good case to educate people about, because you have, coverage in the media. You have a clear problem with how the judge evaluated the original, evidence from the mother, her concerns, and the concerns of professionals. The mother is not a professional.
Right.
You have to go to a professional child protective services worker, pediatrician, maybe law enforcement, and those people, and they're hard to convince, but those people thought abuse had taken place. And so that the judge didn't find them credible either is pretty amazing. And so this is one of those cases where there was so much documentation of what we and others would call judicial betrayal. Judge betraying the best interest or the health and well-being of a child.
Right.
It's also, to a degree, I would use the word institutional betrayal, where law enforcement in the form of the district attorney's office sat on this case for so many years. I don't know what kind of a good excuse there could be there.
I know. I used to go on Mother's Day to the White House, in front of the White House, rather, to march with mothers of lost children. And I remember this one young lady who was in tears because it had been 7 years since she had seen her son. She even had the day, the years, the day, and the minutes and the seconds.
Yes, I know her.
And it was still ticking as to when was the last time she saw her son. There was another woman that asked me, she said, "Miss Muhammad, I have to give my daughter to her father on Fridays, and I have to pick her up on Sundays, and he's raped her the whole weekend. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do because it's court ordered."
That's right.
So we have a lot of children that are not being taken care of by the court system, and it appears to be getting worse. Or is that just...
I don't think it's getting any easier to protect children. I think that, where we see some hope is in our increasing understanding as a country of trauma, the effects of trauma. There is a study that was done of over 17,000 subjects by Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control. That's called the ACEs study. And these adults who were relatively, they had insurance, that meant they were gainfully employed or had the ability to buy insurance. And in that group of people, they were asked 10 questions about childhood experiences, adverse experiences in childhood. And they saw for the health prognosis of these people, the more adverse experiences they had, the more impact there was on their health. And so adverse experiences were witnessing or being in a home where there was domestic violence, child abuse, child sexual abuse, the divorce or separation of your parents, and other serious occurrences in the family. And they found that of men and women together, there was something like 26% had been sexually abused as children.
That's a high number.
Yes.
Wow.
And so that was back in I think I first ran into it in 1996, 97,
So
when I first was starting to work in this.
That number is significantly higher now.
Well, if you think of subjects who are being asked questions, you're not looking at the people who self-destructed with alcohol, drugs, who suicided, who are incarcerated.
Right.
All the people, and all of those things, you're at higher risk for risky behavior, suicide, alcohol and substance abuse, incarceration, early pregnancy is another. So I think that's in some ways almost like a conservative picture of what we are. So that, it's taken years and years for people to take this study seriously. Now they're beginning to take it seriously. And you can see more and more about it. There's a wonderful group called ACEs Connections that we're members of. And ACEs Connections really is the place I go to for information about trauma-informed care. It's now going into the schools, like how do we understand the children in our schools who are acting out, needing special assistance in their behavior. How do we begin to understand this and not just punish them, but understand? And so the question is not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you.
Can you spell that? ACEs?
ACEs, yes, surely. It's ACES, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study.
Okay.
And then anyone can Google ACEs Connections, and that is a tremendous resource to begin to, see what's going on, not just locally, but nationally.
Okay, so we're going to take another break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll talk about trauma-informed care.
Okay.
Because we really need to understand the traumatic experiences that children are going through in a divorce and in trying to relate to each other. So we'll be right back. Thank you for viewing us.
Have you been looking for a new car? Godwin Motors has got you covered. Check out their credit stimulus package sales event. 100% credit approval regardless of credit, and emergency lenders on hand. Godwin Motors is located at 9071 Lanham Severn Road in Lanham, Maryland, 20706. Log on to their website at www.godwinmotorsonline.com or call 301-577-0400. That's 301-577-0400. That's Godwin Motors. And let them know you heard about them on WBGRsports.com.
Times are hard for many people in America today, but change can begin when you take action for yourself. Help is here. Log on to mymoneymyfreedom.com and get connected with a proven recession-proof company that has been helping people find financial freedom for nearly a decade. Whether you're looking to supplement or replace your income, they can help. They're a company with a AAA rating from the Better Business Bureau, and they do business in over 40 countries. Log on to mymoneymyfreedom.com. No selling soap, perfume, or makeup to your family and friends. No cold calling or knocking on doors for customers. They bring the customers right to you. The first step is yours. Take action now. Log on to mymoneymyfreedom.com. Their team of professionals are ready to help you succeed. Don't wait. Take action now. Start improving your financial future and put the passion back in your life. Log on to mymoneymyfreedom.com. That's mymoneymyfreedom.com. Take action now.
So before we talk about trauma-informed care, and again, thank you for coming back to the Mildred Muhammad Show. Can you tell us more about your organization and what you do?
Right. So Child Justice it's actually Child Justice Incorporated, that's our formal name, is a 501c3. We were incorporated in 2012, and then opened our doors in April of 2013. We were hosted by a law firm in Washington, D.C., for which we are still tremendously grateful. We're now in Silver Spring at Metro Plaza, hosted by DB Consulting Group Incorporated. And Child Justice was brought into being after the group I had worked with for 12 years, Justice for Children, needed to close its D.C. office. And so we thought, what do we do now? And we realized we had to keep on with this work. And so in the meanwhile, after we opened our doors, it was just me all by myself. And at that point, I was trying, reaching out to law firms in the DC area and in other states to secure pro bono legal counsel in cases where there's been child abuse, domestic violence, and where the abuser was trying to get sole custody or custody at all. And that went on for 3 years like that. And then in 2016, two wonderful things happened. We received an anonymous donation that allowed us to hire a legal director, who is Paul Griffin, who's an attorney. And I have worked with Paul for, I would say, 16 years now, 16, 17 years. He was with other law firms and did a ton of pro bono work for us then as an attorney. And then in 2016, we applied for and were granted a Victims of Crime Act grant through the state of Maryland. And there we were able to hire a staff attorney, Alexandra Sandez. And I have an assistant now, which is amazing. We had somebody help me track everything and keep things in order, and she is extraordinary. Her name is Michelle Banks. We are all now Silver Springers, so we live in Silver Spring, and our office is in Silver Spring. So our mission is protecting children, providing support, promoting change. And we do this by providing free or pro bono legal assistance in cases where there's been child abuse and or domestic violence. We're supportive to the parent we're working with. We do court watch. We have conversations with them. We give them information about resources. And in Maryland, because of our grant, we're able to support them with litigation support. That means we're able to help out with transcription fees, with expert witness fees, which are some of the obstacles that many people face who are financially devastated, and they cannot hire an expert or get a transcript done.
So is this a national organization or is it local?
Our grant is local. We get requests for help from all over the country. And the way that we're national is when we often work collaboratively with other organizations like the Domestic Violence Legal Empowerment and Appeals Project. And so we will work on amicus curiae briefs with them, or groups reach out to us from other states and they say, would you please do a friend of the court or an amicus curiae brief for us? And then we will find pro bono, a law firm willing to do that pro bono. And that's, for us, not a huge investment of time because they write the brief, they do the research. Sometimes if we know something that's very particularly helpful, either legally or with the social science and mental health research, we'll give it to them. But they're the ones producing that brief. So it's relatively, the cost-benefit ratio is really very good for us.
So if someone is trying to get in contact with you, someone may be going through this in their situation and they aren't able to get the legal support that they need, how would they contact you?
Probably the easiest way is through my very ordinary email, which is Eileen, so EILEEN .king, KING, @AOL.com. And as I said, we're primarily concentrating on the Maryland cases.
And also, if you go to the MildredMuhammadShow.com website, you click on upcoming guests, then you will see that Eileen and her organization website is there, so you can contact her through that as well. So, trauma-informed care.
Yes, that is a wonderfully and hugely growing area of not just expertise, but of application. Because what does it matter, people know a whole lot in their heads. What does it matter if we have all of this incredible research? What really matters is how, whether it's being applied or not. And so I mentioned earlier that school systems in particular, I would say out in Washington State and the Walla Walla They have a school there where they're applying trauma-informed perspectives and care into their actual school system. So instead of doing very punitive, timeouts or other harsh disciplinary measures, expelling children from school, they're looking into alternative ways to calm a child, to give them space, to give them time to collect themselves, which isn't punitive, which doesn't say you are,
Something's wrong with
you, and you don't belong here.
So trauma informed.
Yes.
Means what? Trauma informed.
It means that it really informed about not just the ACE study, but what are the consequences of being abused, of being in a family where you have horrific coercive control, domestic violence, domestic abuse. What happens if you have a child who watches his pets or her pets being abused or killed? What happens when the child sees his mother or her mother thrown down the stairs, dragged, with the car? Rages. What happens when the child is punished by not being able to eat? What happens when a child has medical needs or is autistic and isn't getting the help and therapy they need? Because this is also what we see. We have more and more cases where the child is autistic and they're not getting the help they need. Because the abuser says, I don't believe it. That's, doesn't matter.
Right.
We'll do better without all this, therapy.
Constantly sending the child through a traumatic experience.
Yeah. And so what we know now is that, and this is where it becomes very important for beyond schools and beyond our communities to understand, what are you really looking at when you see a child acting out, misbehaving, when you see a child excuse me, who seems not to be able to pay attention in school, a child who's doing poor academically, or maybe a child is doing really well academically, but they're isolated from their peers, from their friends. They don't have any friends.
Right.
What do you think when a child, and we have cases like this, who is acting out sexually on his or her playmates?
So let's
you have to understand. And so sometimes, and the misunderstanding can be, oh, that's just how children are.
Right.
Or that child has ADHD or ADD. Or how boys are.
Yeah, that's the standard right there.
Yeah, or how this racial group is.
Yes, right.
You can so horribly and mistakenly compartmentalize and miss what's happening.
So if a child comes to an adult and says that they are being sexually abused, or they use the rape word, or often what we do as adults, we don't believe the child, and the very person that they tell us that they are being abused by, the adult will go to the other adult and tell them what the child has said. So what would you suggest when a child comes to you and says, I'm being abused? What should be the next step?
That is, this is the hardest part.
Right.
It's the hardest part because we talk and work with parents who have done everything right. Everything right. They listened to the child. They listened carefully. They didn't say to the child, I don't believe you. Right. They accepted what the child said. They didn't ask the child leading questions. Because other people later on will say, oh, you contaminated the child with your leading questions, didn't you? They, the other right things is to not themselves break down in front of the child. The right thing would be to report it
To the
to
police.
the police
Okay.
or to Child Protective Services.
Okay.
Those are the right things to do,
Mhm.
but the hardest part to communicate to people is that you can do every single thing right, but it doesn't lead to a right decision, by authorities, by police, by Child Protective Services.
So that leaves them feeling hopeless. I shouldn't have said anything in the first place.
They often feel
I should
hopeless.
not have gotten involved.
Well, and then there's the the hard thing is, and so this is what we often hear, mothers say to me, I've talked to the social worker at Child Protection Services. I'm really upset that nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really upset my child isn't getting protection. And they think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be, tread on some delicate ground here.
Okay.
But if you're a black woman,
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult. If you're a black woman from Africa, it's even worse. And I don't want to say I shouldn't say one is worse than the other, but we have cases with both. And it's extremely difficult to get the right people to give it the right attention.
And why is that?
I think that there can be language problems. So if you have somebody who speaks a dialect or English with a very strong accent, then they may not be understood. And then there's also very understandable. I'm a mom. I know how I feel about my child. If you're a mother and you feel your child is being hurt and nobody's helping your child, and they're looking at you like you're the crazy
problem.
one,
Correct.
you get a little bit exasperated. You get a little bit frustrated. You get a little bit angry. And that exasperation, anger, frustration is interpreted to your, it's a, how would you say, it's a mark on your credibility.
Mm-hmm. It's like
Yeah.
for whatever reason, they want to paint black women as the angry black
Exactly.
woman, and so
Exactly.
because you're angry, so you don't have a right
Yeah.
to get angry, you don't have a right to be frustrated. We're supposed to just sit there, be
That's
quiet,
right.
and go along with what they're
That's right.
what they're being told
Like, how
to
dare
do.
you?
How dare you
How
be
dare
upset?
you?
You should just accept this and keep it moving.
And there is also, and this is real historical stuff here, but when President Clinton was in office, there was a push to get women off of welfare. The way it was like getting women back to work. And they didn't want the women on welfare because it was eating up so much money. One of the strategies was to get more men paying child support, more fathers paying child support. That's where the Responsible Fatherhood Initiative had its birth.
Okay.
So that's all kind of reasonable. You could say it's reasonable, yeah. But then they thought, well, to get men to pay child support, you've got to get them connected with the child. So there was a push in the courts to not just get them to pay child support, but to get them back in contact, back seeing the children, back having them for overnights. And then there were men who said, this isn't good enough. I want, the abusive one said, I want it all. I don't want to pay child support. Why should I pay child support?
Right.
And I've been called by guys like that who say, can you reverse it for me so I don't have to pay child support? I'm like, no, we don't do that. So historically there's a reason, there are reasons for all of this. And so then there's this feeling in the court, and we see this all over, if a black man wants to be with his child, what a great dad. Why would we not let that good man be with his child or children? And so that's where you get a looking away from the evidence, a looking away from the reasonable or documented concerns of the mother. You're looking away from what the child is saying. You're looking away from how the child is demonstrating in its behavior that something is wrong.
But that could be any father.
Could be any
terms of
father.
that. Right.
It could be any father, and I would say that it would be, that's a phenomena you would see with any is a racial ethnic group.
Correct.
It is across the board. Across
Correct.
the board.
Correct.
If a dad says, I want to be with my child, I want to do the best for my child possible, I love my child,
Mm-hmm.
the court goes, well, that's good.
Let's
good.
look at the evidence.
Yeah. And we say you've got to look at the evidence,
Correct.
and you have to take these things seriously, because it's not just these next few months of the child's life. It's their whole life.
Right.
It's how they're going to be themselves a mother or a father later on, how they're going to be able to work, how they're going to contribute to their community, how they're going to be a responsible adult, in the context of, our whole social being and network here.
Correct. So when we come back, we're going to have a few more minutes. We're going to wrap up, and then you can
Okay.
tell us about the event that you all are having
Yes,
with
yeah.
Johnny Mathis that's
Yes,
coming to the area.
yes.
And also about the custody litigation trauma for the
Yeah.
battered
Better Mothers Custody Conference.
in May.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back.
So is that going okay?
Yeah, it's going good.
Okay. Yes, give her a
Yeah.
Okay.
It's cool. Can't hear me, right? I told you I talk soft.
We like, okay, turn it down with her. Okay, turn it off.
I'm trying to talk loud.
When's the last time someone said thanks for checking over your shoulder before changing lanes? Or gave you a pat on the back for sticking to the speed limit? Or a thumbs up for not tailgating? Probably never. Which is too bad, considering safe drivers make the roads safer for everyone. That's why Allstate appreciates safe drivers like no one else. And they show it by saving you 45% or more, along with giving you safe driving bonus checks, deductible rewards, and extra discounts with the DriveWise app. So the next time you come to a complete stop in an intersection, ask yourself, why haven't I switched to Allstate?
The Brandeo Insurance Group, your local DMV Allstate agent, can help you save 45% or more for driving safely. Call him at 410-424-0844 and get a quote today.
It pays to drive safely. Call a local Allstate agent today and find out how you can save 45% or more. Switching to Allstate is worth it.
Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability.
Thank you for returning to the Mildred Muhammad Show. Now we're going to talk about your event that's coming up with Johnny Mathis. So when will that be held?
That is going to be September 23rd, 2018, this year. And it's going to take place at the Woodmont Country Club in Bethesda, Maryland. And we are beyond thrilled that Johnny Mathis is going to come and do a concert with us. It's
Johnny Mathis, so chances are, right?
Chances are,
That's
yeah.
the song that comes to my mind when I think about it.
For the younger people, they're not, a lot of people don't know like who Johnny Mathis is. And but for my generation,
I think they're going to have to Google him.
I think they're going to have to Google
him.
him.
He's pretty impressive, and he sings very well. And I remember my mom always listening to him when I was younger, so
yeah.
That's why I know the chances are, because that was her favorite song.
Absolutely, chances are, and we grew up as children. I was born in '48, so we grew up listening to Johnny Mathis, and when my mother was on her deathbed, we played Johnny Mathis for her.
Okay.
Just that beautiful voice
that he has, and he does the
extraordinarily beautiful voice and presence in his music, and the September 23rd is my mother's birthday. So
how can they find out about tickets?
We will be putting this on our website, the Child-Justice website. We're just about to design a Facebook advertisement.
Okay.
We're going to have something that I send out via email.
Okay.
So we're going to be widely distributing this. And so Mr. Mathis, his folks have very specific ways they want these things to be done and designed. So we're going to do that. We'll be very, very correct about
Strategic.
that, very
Mhm.
strategic.
Mhm.
We want them to be happy with what we're doing.
Absolutely. And then the event in May.
Right, well,
The better.
part of my cold came from being in Albany. Albany was really pretty warm, but it was very air conditioned there. And so, excuse me, the name of the Battered Mothers Custody Conference of this year, and it was the 13th year, it was called Custody, Litigation, Trauma, and Recovery.
Okay.
And this was from May 4th to 6th at the Red Lion Inn in Albany, New York. And the subtitle is Battered Women, Abused Children, and Child Custody, a National Crisis.
It is a national crisis.
Yes.
And it's one that we need to get more information about.
Absolutely.
And to also do something to help those actions needs to be taken forth in the community to understand that our children are being hurt.
Yes.
And there's not a lot being done about it. I remember you saying that there's more money with abusers than it is with child abuse.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Well, let's see if I can find the best way to explain this. People always say, like, why does this continue like this?
Right.
Why don't people recognize this as a social, problem, a civil rights problem? What about the children's rights? Children don't have legal rights. What about the, the Me Too movement? What about No More? What about breaking, what about all of this, this attention? I think it's still invisible because they're children. I think it's still invisible because it's he said, she said. Women's voices get subsumed by the male voice. That's still very much there in our sort of gender politics. But I also think that there is a money aspect here. The money aspect is that if you are in the business of being an attorney who represents abusers, you're going to do pretty well because they often have much more money. They have more financial assets at their disposal. And they may also have families who have more financial assets at their disposal. So we've seen cases where the grandparents have stepped in for the abusive parent and funded the case. So there's a lot of money to be made. If you're an expert who is called in to testify in these cases, to do psychological or custody evaluations, and then you're testifying, you get a ton of money. We were just informed that a current case, it's $55,000 for the expert to produce their report.
Wow.
$55,000.
We're going to leave that right there.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you
You're so
for
welcome.
coming on my show to talk about the traumatic experiences that children are enduring and how we as a community have to do our part to help them as much as we can.
Yes.
So we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you again for coming to view the Mildred Muhammad Show, and I'll leave you with my quote that I put on my Facebook page every day, and that is, release your faith, knowing with assurance that all circumstances will work in your favor today. Check out my website, themildredmuhammadshow.com, to see who our guests will be for next week, and I'll see you then. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to our show and to meet Eileen King and her organization, Child Justice, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
It's the new all-natural